everybody, I'm Kendall.
And I'm Ian. We're by Gearheads, and Kendall just got back from Santa Cruz, California. What were you doing out there?
We were doing a headquarters tour, looking at all the mountain bikes that Santa Cruz is working on, all of their manufacturing and assembly process. It was super cool.
We do have timestamps down below, so you can jump around as you see fit. We go through some of the processes and also some of the different models of bikes.
All right, Ian, let's get into it.
All right, so the first thing we're gonna get into is Santa Cruz history. Santa Cruz has been building bikes since 1994, and the first one was the Tasman. Their main focus has been building high quality bikes for any riding style.
Exactly, so we spoke to our old buddy Garin, and he can provide a little bit more insight into the history and the ethos of Santa Cruz.
Take it away, Garin.
I guess the recipe for Santa Cruz for a long time has been like, we've all just built bikes that we want to ride. There's always been a bike for someone. And as the models have increased, we end up with all these categories that the generalist can slot into. 1 millimeter of difference up, down, side to side on one of those bores changes the way the whole thing rides. So like 1.5 inches wheel size is miles and miles and miles when it comes to bike setup. We've gone down the road a bunch of making the bike as versatile as you can possibly make it, but like when it comes down to it, if you try to fill all the holes with one product, it just doesn't work for us. For us, there's probably between 2 and 4 or 5 mules, prototypes for each model as we go. The process of mules is like, we can put that on an actual bike, we can actually go ride that bike. And if you don't have that, then how do you move forward? How do you make it better? I would say that we have the most excitable, energetic bike riding crew we probably ever have. Instead of a smaller group of core enthusiasts, which is what our company was and has been, it is now a larger group of enthusiasts. So we have the core, but we've also got like new cyclists. And those are the ones that really bring the enthusiasm and the joy to the whole thing.
Thanks, Garin. Yeah, I think it's immediately apparent just how passionate the group of riders from Santa Cruz is. I mean, I think they're really just a group of people that came together and decided to make bikes, and it's a cool environment.
Yeah, it's always nice to see bike companies filled with people that ride bikes.
Definitely, that's what you want to see.
Yeah, Garin really went through the history and the ethos of Santa Cruz, really nailed it, but we've scraped up a few fun facts that we want to go through.
Yeah, we have some good stuff that we got together, so we'll get started. So Santa Cruz is a big supporter of local and global trail foundations. They actually donate all of the fees associated with their demo fleet of rental bikes. They donate all of those to trail foundations around the world that are just, doing volunteer work, getting trails built, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and to add on to that, they give their employees PTO to go dig the trails.
It's pretty cool.
That is very cool.
Santa Cruz also has their sustainability bases covered. They actually have 80,000 square feet of solar panels spread throughout the facility on the roof and in the parking lot. So that's powering the factory, which is awesome.
Wow, that's wild. And I wasn't there, so I'm a little bummed I didn't get to see this, but they recycle a ton of old bike frames as wall art across the facility.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, there were probably 100 bikes throughout the facility that were hung up, and it's just cool to see those not end up in landfills. Like, they're usable things that somebody spent a lot of time on. And speaking of recycling, they also recycle 83% of the boxes and packaging that they're receiving from their vendors, and so they're reusing that when they're sending things back out, which is really cool. And 83% is like a high number.
Man, that's awesome. They sound like they've got their sustainability, recycling, they've got all that going on. That's really great.
They are on point.
All right, so with the fun facts out of the way, let's get into the line of bikes.
Yeah, we got to ride a handful of them while we're out there. We're just gonna really quick run through the models. First up, we have the hardtail, which is the Chameleon, along with the Blur, which is like kind of the dedicated cross-country race bike. This is gonna be the shortest travel options in the line. The Blur is 29 only, and the Chameleon does have a mixed wheel option, which is cool. Those are the cross-country bikes out of the way. What's up next?
So you're moving into the trail bikes at this point.
That's right.
I have a tall boy, which I absolutely love, and then you rode.
I got to ride a 5010, which was the first time I've ridden one, and it was awesome. So this is like the short travel trail category, but yeah, this is gonna be kind of your general do-it-all mountain bike, right? This is probably what most people are riding. Super forgiving to beginners, but experts can totally ride them as well. The tall boy is gonna be 120 in the rear, and the 5010 is gonna be 130. The tall boy is 2.9 only, and the 5010 is MX.
And then we get into the core of our trail category, and what bikes are those?
Now we're into the high tower and the Bronson, so if you're living in an area with like some steeper mountains and you have access to more different types of terrain, these are going to be the bikes that are probably going to suit you the best. The high tower is going to be 145 in the rear. It's going to be 29-inch wheels only. The Bronson's going to be 150 in the rear, and that one's going to be mixed wheel only. These are super fun bikes to ride. I've spent a lot of time on a high tower. It's amazing how efficient that bike still is for how hard it can ride downhill.
Yeah, and just to add some more to this, the Tallboy 5010 and the high Hightower are probably our top selling bikes that we sell on Competitive Cyclists.
True, those things fly off the shelves.
Yeah, they do. All right, after that, we get into Enduro.
Oh, my favorite category. So here we have the Nomad and the Mega Tower. The Mega Tower is going to be 165 millimeters of travel in the rear, and it's going to have 29-inch wheels only. And we did a long-term review on this bike. Check it out in the description below. And then the Nomad is going to be 170 mil travel. So this is a big bad bike.
That's a big boy.
It's mixed wheel only. It's going to be awesome for enduro riding, but also like free ride.
Yep. And then we get into downhill.
Yep, we got the V10. You'll see Jackson Goldstone ripping that thing in the World Cup races. It is just a beautiful bike to look at. The thing's crazy. It's awesome. Definitely going to be for bike park and racing only, but it's an awesome bike.
Definitely. And then the growing segment in cycling right now, everybody's talking about, we got e-bikes.
Yeah, their e-bike line's super impressive. They have 2 full power e-bikes, so you have the Heckler and the Bullet. Those come in a bunch of different build options, and then the newest bike is the Heckler SL. So this is going to be their lightweight offering. It uses a different motor and battery combination, and it really feels like a regular mountain bike that just also has pedal assist. So it doesn't have that big, heavy, plowy feeling. It's far more used to what you ride when you're doing your normal analog thing.
Yeah, and I know you guys spoke to Garin. I mean, in the trail category and kind of cross country, you kind of start to see them blur into each other a little bit.
Yeah.
So does he break down what the differences are, little nuances here and there?
Definitely, and I think a lot of people get overwhelmed with all the different models in the line, and I think the first thing to understand is just that there's basically a 29-inch wheeled option and a mixed wheel option for all the categories, and I think once you understand that, it becomes a lot easier to understand.
Nice. Well, let's kick it over to Garin now, and he is going to explain to us some of the finer nuances of these models.
I think a lot of people look at Santa Cruz and they just go like, there's so many models and they all look the same. A Blur and a Tallboy are just 2 different bikes. You know, you look at them on paper and the Blur is a 115 rear and 120 fork, and the Tallboy is a 120, 130 bike, and they're both 29ers, but they're just so different. The Blur is like pounds lighter and much more conservative and twitchy and energetic in its geo, and the Tallboy is an all-day trail bike. And so like, if you look at all these bikes on paper, you might think they're all kind of similar, but they're actually wildly different. They're all bikes that people at the company want to ride. So you end up just making more of them. Like, there's always someone going, oh, what if like we had something in between that bike? What if we had something in between Hightower and Tallboy? That's the 5010. You know, there's just all this nuance. And I love it because we can all slot in where we feel we fit best. For me, like I have a distinct genre of bikes at Santa Cruz that I ride. They're 5010 Nomad Bullet. These are aggressive bikes meant for like, not necessarily a racer, but like for a core enthusiast who's like into riding steep, gnarly shit, who may not be the fastest guy on the uphill, but like I really pride myself on having fun on the downhill. That's what it's all about for me. And so you've got bikes for that. But then on the other side, you've got bikes for like, I would say more your generalist mountain biker. The Tallboy is a great example of like efficient, fast, energetic, sprightly climber that you can literally ride on any trail. It's capable enough, and it's like an all-day bike. It's like the one bike for a lot of people. As time goes by, you just end up adding more and more and more, and pretty soon you have all these sort of little brand names within the Santa Cruz brand that end up as our go-to models. When you look at the numbers, you look at them all and you say, maybe we could drop one of these, maybe we could not make that one. But you look at the sales numbers and you're like, well, there's a lot of fans. There's a lot of people who love this one. So let's just keep making all of them. Let's have a bike for every single type of rider.
All right, well, that was cool to get Garin's take on that. But man, a lot of companies are still doing these flip ships to go from the MX wheels 29. I mean, why doesn't Santa Cruz do that?
Good question. Yeah, Santa Cruz basically is coming from the philosophy where they just want to build a frame from the ground up with a dedicated purpose in terms of wheel size. And
It seems like they don't make any compromises. They just want the bike that's specific for that
Absolutely.
particular build.
Yeah, and I think that actually comes from their like Syndicate racing team. You know, Garin mentioned like he compared that whole process to like the Formula One process, where you get the Formula One race cars, they're getting the highest level of technology investment, and then that's trickling down to like the actual the road legal cars from the same brands. And I think Santa Cruz is doing a good job with that.
Gotcha. Just to back up a little bit, the Syndicate team, is that a downhill team? I mean, like me, I'm more of a roadie and I do more
For sure.
cross country stuff.
Yeah.
So I would think like, oh, the development's coming from that side. But it seems like they're starting at the long travel bikes and kind of working down. I mean, is that what's going on?
Exactly. Yeah. So the Syndicate, that's their World Cup race team. So you have Jackson Goldstone, Laurie Greenland, some other guys, and they're racing at the highest level. They're also racing the new Red Bull Hardline series, which is really cool. But hey, you guys don't need to hear it from me. Garin's the inside man here. Let's see what he has to say about the Syndicate.
Downhill for us is like, it's like F1 for Ferrari or whatever. You know, you're putting all the development and all the work and all the energy into developing literally the fastest bike in the world. It's raced by the fastest riders in the world in a very specific field that is at an absolute furthest margin of our sport over here on the side. And then all that technology comes down into the rest of the bikes that we're building. So the Syndicate, yeah, is absolutely involved in testing and refining the V10, but not so much in the rest of it. The rest of it, we've got guys like Kieran McKinnon, who's, you know, national champ downhiller and just kind of a suspension obsessed thinker. He likes things that go fast, and anything that he can sink his teeth into and make better, that's what he likes to do. So as far as athletes go, they all play a role, but in the prototype stages, it's a pretty internal thing.
Thanks, Garin. Yeah, that was really cool to see how they trickle down the technology from the Syndicate team and how they use athletes to develop their bikes. We were talking off camera a little bit about some of the stuff you got to see, so maybe run us through that.
Yeah, we got to see a couple of the World Cup bikes of old, one of which was Steve Pete's race bike, which actually had like tubular tires, crazy long travel fork. It was really cool, tiny little wheels.
Tubular tires, that kind of comes from the road world. That's nuts.
Yeah, we're going way back.
Way back.
Way back. And it had an awesome speckled paint job that like hadn't faded at all over the years.
No,
Pretty
that's
impressive.
rad. All right, so yeah, that's cool to hear about all those bikes for the Syndicate and all the athletes, but you know, they make bikes for every rider, so I want to hear a little bit more about that.
That's true. Yeah, we got to talk with Hannah from Juliana. She's kind of the jack of all trades over there on that side. She ran us through the line a little bit and just talked to us about the Juliana brand ethos. It gives women riders just like a lot more options in terms of like frame sizes. It even gives them like better saddle options, handlebar widths, shock tunes. Like they are like purpose built. Yeah.
That's very cool. All right, we're gonna go over to Hannah and she's gonna break it down for us.
Women don't need a different geometry bike, right? People need different geometry based on your body type, but women do have, you know, different needs in terms of, we have a women's specific saddle, we do have narrower handlebars, we do have a lighter compression shock tune, which I was a little skeptical of when I first came onto Juliana, and I got to go out with Kieran and he had me blind testing shocks all day. Put a shock on, put a different, like which one feels better? By the end of the day I was like, without a doubt, this one is better, and sure enough, it was a Rubion shock tune versus a Bronson. And it really benefits most people who weigh under like 180 pounds, so that's our biggest distinction. You can't really compare Juliana to Santa Cruz, which is hard not to do because we're the same company, but you know, we are a very different brand. And then you look at our line, you're like, oh wow, there's 4 bikes compared to, you know, the 17 or whatever that Santa Cruz has. Our biggest travel right now is the Rubion, which is my daily driver. Mullet platform, you know, that 29-inch front wheel. It used to be 27.5, and wow, it's just such a benefit. Moving down, you know, then we have the Furtado. Mullet platform, just smaller travel with 130 in the rear, 140 up front. Similar to how Garin was describing 5010, it's just such a good bike for everyone. You can push it on this bike, and it's also really great entry. And then we have the Joplin and the Wilder. So the Joplin being, you know, 29-inch wheel platform, 130 mils up front, 120 in the back. That is like our all-day machine. Like if you have those big alpine rides you've been dying to do, you want to be in the saddle all day, that's the Joplin. And then we have the Wilder, which is our XC race machine, but still fun enough to be your everyday bike. It's got 120 mils of suspension up front, 115 in the back, 29-inch wheel set, and yeah, that bike is awesome.
Thanks, Hannah. That was cool that she ran us through that line. It's awesome that they're not just shrinking and pinking these bikes for Juliana. They're actually taking the female riders' input into consideration and designing around that.
Yeah, it is really good to see what they're doing over at Juliana, and it was really cool to see like the blind tested shock test that she talked about. Like that's pretty impressive that she was able to pinpoint the best one, and it, you know, turned out to be the Juliana shock tune. It's just pretty rad.
Sounds like they're doing something right then.
Yeah.
All right, Kendall. So let's get into design, build, and quality control at Santa Cruz Bicycles. And let's start with the prototype.
Totally, yeah. So the prototype at Santa Cruz basically begins as an aluminum mule, as they call it. All the tubes and the linkage is basically like CNC machined from aluminum. And then they're slapping components on, and then they're riding in Santa Cruz to do their testing, figure out what they like, what they don't like, travel, geo, all that stuff. And that's everything that goes down before the carbon process even starts.
All right, so speaking of carbon, what do they do at Santa Cruz headquarters with carbon?
The frames that they're actively producing and selling are made off-site, but they do test the new carbon layups in-house at Santa Cruz. And so we got to speak with one of the head engineers, and he showed us some really cool stress testing that they were doing. He even showed us the way that they lay up carbon, the different layers, and we actually got to see one of Danny McCaskill's trials frames. They had like just finished building it, so that was sick.
So are they doing like aluminum prototypes, then sending those designs to a factory in Asia somewhere, they're laying up the carbon, then they're getting that back and testing it, or are they laying up their first runs of carbon frames in-house?
They're laying up the first runs in-house before they send it off-site. So that way they have like full control over durability. Like I said, they have those 2 stress tests that they showed us. Those are really cool to see in person, and like the impacts that they're putting those frames through, that the frames are regularly surviving as well is yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, not all bike manufacturers have that capability to actually lay up carbon at their HQ.
Yeah,
That's
it's really
cool.
sweet. Speaking of that off-site facility, this facility only makes Santa Cruz bikes, so they're not sharing this space with any other manufacturers. It's purpose-built for their frames.
All right, so they've laid up their first runs, they've tested them, they've sent them to a factory, and now they've got them back at their HQ in California. What happens next?
So from there, they go into the assembly process, and this is one of the craziest parts of the facility. Basically, they have super specialized systems where they basically will run like a single frame and build sometimes through the whole production center, and everyone will just be cranking out Chameleon R builds for like a day or 2 nonstop. You can just see, watching everyone work, how efficient it all is. We watched a handful of guys do all of the different parts, and I think one of my favorites was watching the 2 triangles come together. One of the mechanics had like all these crazy systems where he'd like put a bolt on a drill and then he'd spin it on like a towel that he had on his bike stand that was like preset with grease.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so he'd just like real quick grease them, plug them in. The speed at which they were able to do their jobs, you could tell that these guys are absolute pros. There's no funny business going on there.
Oh, that's great. So did they go through the same exact flow for a regular bike and an e-bike, or are they different?
I mean, they're a little bit different, but we actually got to see both. Both get fully assembled and then broken back down and put into the box. So they're seeing the same like quality assurance standards. Obviously with one, you just, you got the motor and the battery, and that takes a little bit of extra time. The employees get a lot of freedom to engineer the system to their advantage in-house. So for example, like there was a hand welded cart that they were using on some of the e-bikes that allowed them to move the bikes upside down before they go into the boxing process, for which they had a dedicated box flipper that got things turned around really quickly and efficiently before the box got closed up and sent out.
So like the people at the HQ, at the factory at Santa Cruz, just working in the factory are making these apparatuses.
Yeah,
That's wild.
they're just like making the process better from start to finish at every opportunity that they can. It was awesome to see.
Hannah's gonna break this down for us as well, so.
Let's hear it from her.
The amount of eyes and hands that are on each bike before it goes out the door is pretty wild. It's not like one person is building one bike and sees it from start to finish. One person is installing the cranks, moves on to the next person. So again, leading to more eyes on the product, and then leading to people being specialized in their field. And people do switch around with time, so they all are pretty knowledgeable. But yeah, staying at a station for months at a time to make it the best product it can be.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, I think seeing the efficiency from the facility kind of explains how dialed a Santa Cruz is when you get it in the box. Everything's accounted for, the attention to detail is unmatched. So that's awesome to see. And speaking of which, Reserve also does a fine job.
Yeah, so Santa Cruz, we've talked about Santa Cruz bicycles, talked about Juliana, and most people are probably aware, but maybe not everyone, they also own Reserve.
They do. Something I learned that I didn't know until I went to the factory is that, including the Reserve wheels that they build in-house, all of the other wheels that go on Santa Cruz complete bikes are totally laid up and built in-house by the Reserve experts. That gives them complete control of the build process of the wheels, gives them better control over the quality, spoke tensioning, all those sorts of
Wow,
things.
I didn't realize that. So even like if there's a Santa Cruz bike that you buy and it has an aluminum wheel on it, it might not say Reserve, but the team that does Reserve wheels is still building that wheel for your bike.
Exactly.
Wow.
And they do have a machine that kind of like lays the spokes and gets the builds started, but every single wheel gets real human hands on it, which I think is just a testament to their attention to detail and quality standards.
So we pretty much ran through everything that we saw at the Santa Cruz headquarters. That
Sure
was
did.
that was great. Thanks for running us through that. Thanks for everybody at Santa Cruz for accommodating us. How about you give us your final thoughts and impressions on the factory?
It was just kind of a dream come true to see all that stuff come to life in person, and to get to explore the local trails with Garin and crew was even better. I was stoked to ride some Santa Cruzes and stoked to ride more in the future.
Yeah, a lot of Santa Cruz fanboys and fangirls around here, I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, I think we'll get some engagement from the local Salt Lake City population on this one.
Yeah, definitely. And the people that work here. Everybody loves Santa Cruz. Well, thanks for watching. Make sure that you like this video. And if you have questions, comment down below. And make sure you subscribe to our channel. If you're interested in any of these bikes, reach out to a gearhead.
Yeah, definitely reach out to a gearhead if you have any questions. We'll be sure to get you, on your new bike.
We'll see you out there on the trails.
Yep.